when I say money, let me change it to say strategies. They talk about strategies, and that's where we got to get to, where we start talking about strategies. Um, there are different concepts and different strategies, but you ever think about it? Like, why are like why are the Asians able to buy stores in our neighborhoods?
Oh, I'll be happy to answer that. It's
What,
called
what's how you think?
it's called cooperative and collective economics.
Absolutely,
That's why.
they put all their money in.
Zero interest
They
loans.
live in the same house
Exactly.
for what? For however long it takes for them to stack their paper, and then they get a
You get
house,
another house and bring five more people over. You
and
understand what
then
I mean?
and then the person that buys the store has to put back into the pot. So what they'll
Absolutely.
do is they'll all stack, and they say, "All right, it's your turn." They go buy a store, and then they'll keep putting back into the pot so that the next person can buy a store.
Yeah, there's another caveat to that as well. They get a lot of help from
Well,
the
yeah,
government. You know what I
absolutely.
mean? In terms of tax exemptions, in terms of startup money. You know what I mean? And that allows them to keep flipping that whole business with to different people's names. I will bring my cousin from Beijing over. I'm just using that as an example.
Well,
He can start up.
I'll say this in response to that. We have to start looking at the fact that when these people come over from different countries, that they may have some money over there too that helps with them.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, so it's not like they start from ground zero. In my opinion, they got
No, no, no.
something.
Yeah, I'm not saying they start from ground zero, but that
Yeah,
doesn't
so
that doesn't stop the assistance that they get from the government when they come over here.
I think it's because they have something to barter. That's what I think. I don't think they're giving anything. I think they barter.
I'm gonna do a little.
Another term would be that they negotiate the rates or whatever, and whatever they're bringing from their home country, they're able to use that to get whatever interest rates that they want to get. I think that's a factor in it. I'm not going to say that there are not any other factors in it, but I don't think it's freely given. I think there's something.
Well, I think they get a couple $1,000s. Upwards around 10, $20,000 to start a business, and they get like at least a five year exemption on paying taxes on that business.
Let me ask you this. Do you think that the drug game plays a role in some of these businesses that are able to open up in our communities?
From other countries.
Yeah.
That's kind of like what I was saying. I don't think that these people are coming over here empty-handed. I think they have something to offer. Um, like if we're talking about Ecuador and we're talking about some of these countries known, Colombia and some of these other countries that are heavy in the drug game, hell yeah, I said they got that something has something to do with it, the drug game. Man, that's a commodity, just like anything else, right? I mean, if
Wow.
I can barter, if I can, huh?
I said, wow.
It's a commodity. Think about it.
Oh, I'm not in disagreement with you at all.
I mean,
I'm just really, I'm just really enjoying the employment of terminology right now.
well, it is. If you think about it, man, that shit earns value, it earns money. But
Oh
we're
yeah,
talking about real money.
oh yeah, fast money.
Yeah. So to answer the brother's question, absolutely, that has something to do with it. It's a commodity. You
That
know,
grows exponentially.
I
I'm
think
trying to think of another word. That's bigger than expeditionary. It's another word, but yeah, it's a commodity.
Magnanimously.
Yes. They say audio magically. There's another
Oh
word.
damn, I ain't never heard that one before.
Yeah, that's one of them computer geek terms.
Audra what?
It's auto magically is what they
Auto
call it.
magic.
Yeah, so
I'm gonna hurt somebody with that one.
yeah, it's yes, the drug game. It's a commodity, man. I'm surprised it's not on the stock exchange.
I'm sure it is under a different name.
Right.
I'm surprised it's not on this damn stock exchange as much money as those jokers make.
Beth, you wanted to say something, Beth?
Yeah, I was just going to say another reason why they have access to loans and stuff is that oftentimes they have their own communities, and their own communities are helping to fund their ventures. So I know here, I'm in Georgia, I know that we have, a vast Asian population in certain areas. If you go into certain areas, I mean, even the stores will have Asian names on them. And at one point they had only Asian names on them, and they had to kind of like create some type of ordinance to make them have the American name to go along with it, because in case of an emergency, the ambulance drivers had no idea where to go because they just were manning everything in that one area. So they can go to their own banks and get loans. Hispanic communities are the same way. They have their own banks, their own insurance companies, their own, grocery stores. They are funding themselves. They are working within their own communities to get money. So they're lending money to one another. Whereas us, we don't really have that. We have some banks that are what we would consider, Black owned banks, but, aren't necessarily really Black owned banks. And we may be able to get a better deal there, but for the most part, we're going to these large banks to try to get loans. And so that's one thing that I think hinders our ability to access capital for the things that we're trying to do. And I think the other part of it is just ignorance and fear. I think that we're afraid. Like, until this whole pandemic happened, I bet there were a lot of Black businesses that never even considered going to the SBA website to see if they were eligible for a loan. Now, I'm not going to say that if they had done this not being in a pandemic, that they would have been approved. I'm not sure about that, but I'm just saying that I just think that some of it is ignorance, fear of being rejected, so there are a lot of dynamics that go into why we don't have the capital. We don't have our own communities to lend us the money as we used to back in the day, Black Wall Street and all of these places. That's why we were thriving, because we were funding ourselves. And so we have to figure out a way to kind of get back to a place where we can fund our own ventures. And because I really have some theories about algorithms being able to kind of like, soon as they check off what your race is, that algorithm can take your loan to another place. And not to say that you would not be approved, but your interest rate might be a little bit higher or whatever. So there's a lot of stuff that can happen. And if we were doing it ourselves, we probably wouldn't have to face that.
Yes, there's some very strong points. And you touched on what I was gonna, add to it. Ironically, before the mid '60s, maybe we had these kind of communities. We had this kind of unity because we had to, because we weren't allowed to play in their pool. We weren't allowed to, play with their ball, so to speak. So we had to do for self. And then assimilation came and civil rights and all that kind of stuff, and it just like wiped us out, along with some pestilence performed by some people on this land who didn't want these communities to stay around.
Right.
It's one of the things that Martin figured out kind of too late.
Right.
Assimilated into a burning house.
Yep.
So
pretty much.
So yeah, your description of the Asian communities that's something that really sits with me. Does that go? Here's a question I'll ask you guys. Does that go to culture, or does that go to unity? What does that go to that other communities are able to bond against all odds and build for themselves? Yet we've been here since the breaking of the ground when these Europeans came over here and decided to take this up as their land.
I'm gonna go back to something that you said, Feek, when you brought up the crack era. No other race of people has dealt with the crack era the way we have had to deal with the crack era. And in my lifetime, I saw my community go from being a vibrant community where all of the homeowners were black, the businesses were black, the laundromat was black, the funeral home was black owned, the corner store was black owned, everything was black owned predominantly. And when crack came, it destroyed all of that. And the only thing was left was the young people coming up. The old people were either knocked off or died of just old age and exhaustion. The businesses disappeared. I mean, just in my lifetime alone, I've seen chemical warfare and how it affects our community in a way that no other communities have been affected. And I'm sure before I was born, there were similar attacks that took place. Before crack, there was heroin. You know what I mean? Even going all the way back to certain stories of indigenous cultures and Europeans giving them blankets with smallpox. It seems like we've been under constant attack. And when the smoke clears, it looks like we just being lazy as a community or we just being ignorant as a community. Because that's pretty much all that's left after the damage has been done is young folks that are misguided and miseducated and a lot of ignorance and a lot of misdirected energy. But the reality of it is that was triggered by certain agendas that have been perpetuated against us. And that's not to make an excuse, but in terms of answering your question, when I look at other communities, I definitely see in other communities they've gone through their own challenges, like the Japanese with Hiroshima and Nagasaki, you know, and different things like that. But we've been under constant attack. We've never had a break. And so, you know, we're in a state right now where if you look at our families now, many of us come from very big families, loving families. But if you look at our families right now, there's so much distortion and dysfunction and division in just our families alone. It makes it almost impossible to achieve the things that we're talking about other cultures are able to achieve. And I think that's just because we've been under constant and emphasis. I emphasize the word constant. We've been under constant attack.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. Al, I think part of it too is, so there is something about, so let's talk about the Black man. And I know Al and Aja, we've had this conversation, but let's talk about the fear of the Black man. So there has been some type of inherent fear of the Black man. And as a result, they have created a narrative about him to create fear in others. There's no fear of the Asian man. There's no fear necessarily of the Mexican man. You know, there might be some notions about, you know, oh, Asian people are smart. You know, Indian people, they, you know, their kids win the spelling bee and they open, you know, 7-Elevens. And, you know, Mexican people, they'll do all your gardening. But there was never a fear of the Asian man, or there was never a narrative put out about who that person is that they needed to perpetuate in throughout throughout the world. Because I've even heard this in other countries, they still are afraid of Black men. So it's something different. And so I agree with you, Elinaj, there has been an assault, and it started with the Black man and, you know, and just kind of grew to the Black community. And so when you come from Asia to America, there's no one who's really that concerned about what you're going to do. That there's no one really concerned, because I mean, when you think about Asian people, you kind of think of them as more docile, you know, in terms of just the way, particularly the women, but you know, just the way they bow and just the certain customs that they have seem to be, I don't know. I just think that there's just this perception of the Black community. They understand the strength and they are afraid of the strength. And so they have to always subdue the strength. And they don't feel that same way when it comes to other communities. They're not concerned about that. Asian people, I mean, right now, I mean, to tell you the truth, what, China is basically the world power. It's no longer the US, it's China. But they've allowed them to get to that point. And so why is that? Because they've never been concerned. They were not on their radar like that. So I think there's something to do with, and then we can go back to culture. Yes, there is a cultural piece to that. So as a result of not being, they were kind of unseen. And so while they were not being the focus of people's attention, they were able to grow. They were able to learn. They were able to take advantage of the things that coming to America had to offer without feeling, out of place. So it's just interesting to see. I mean, I think there are a lot of reasons why, but I do think that there's something about the Black community that people just are afraid of. And it's almost like it's afraid of the power. It's not afraid in the terms of violence. It's just the power, the ability to be powerful. And so maybe that comes from the fact that they did know that we were always here and what we had already accomplished so many years ago. So I don't know. It's interesting to see how other cultures have been able to come over here and get ahead. And it was always our culture who has been suppressed. So
Yeah, I like to jump
Powerful.
on this.
Powerful.
Personally, all those points are extremely valid. It's something I always say. The Black man is, was, and always will be public enemy number one on the shores of this land here in America. Because if we're not, then that just thwarts and kills the whole notion of white supremacy. So let's be absolutely clear. We are the fathers and the mothers of civilization, period. So in order for them to elevate themselves and insert themselves into history, they had to extract the original out of it. The only way they can maintain their stronghold on that is to keep the original suppressed. You understand? Our one problem that I see that we have is a lack of nationality. All of these people that you named, it's not so much culture, but they have a nationality to attach themselves to. And then comes the culture from that. We don't have that. We spoke about this earlier in this segment, how, we were never taught that we were already here. We were taught that every Black person, or the perception is that every Black person that's here now is a product of the 4 million that they brought over here due to this transatlantic slave trade that turned into a booming 40 million. Doesn't add up to me. It's not possible. So until we can get that one thing that we could all say that makes us brothers and sisters, we're not going to be able to overcome anything because we just are always going to see a difference in one another because we assimilated not only to their culture, but we assimilated to their way of thinking. And that prevents us from unifying to be who we are, who we actually are.
So it's almost like you're saying through all of the differences that we have, there is a non-negotiable that we have to have. You cannot. It's like that non-negotiable through all. Like right here, I can have a difference with you on that. There, on my 5 fingers, I can have 5 differences, but we all got to have a non-negotiable where we close our hand and say, "You will not," and we don't have that. Exactly. That's what it sounds like you're saying.
Exactly.
That's
exactly what I'm saying.
For other cultures, I think that's rooted in the concept of language. The one thing that keeps all Chinese people connected and separate from the very thing that they may be associating themselves with in terms of being in this country, the one thing that keeps them united is their language. Same with Spanish people, same with Indian people. They can always break away from that assimilation and go back to their language and speak to each other on terms in which they can understand, feel, and comprehend. The closest thing that I feel like I've had to that growing up was rap music.
Absolutely.
That was probably the closest thing that I've had to feeling like we had our own language, so to speak. And that still was the English language. It just was spoken in a more exclusive dialect. But that's been polluted so much that now it's being weaponized against it.
Yeah, they took that too. They took that
Wow.
too. Well,
Using that concept now, I can see a division amongst us in terms of just using language. Our Caribbean brothers and sisters, they speak speak patois, and they when I was in Jamaica, and I got a colleague. He's becoming a good friend of mine. He's really the one who got me interested in the digital currencies. Well, he's from Trinidad, and it's ironic that the brother was talking about language as one of the cohesive things that they have that binds them against assimilation. When I was in Jamaica, I heard all of those different dialects and that special way that they have with language. It's actually I hate to say, I don't like using the word slave a lot. I'll say enslaved. That's actually what they created out of being enslaved over there in the islands. So it's English, but it's their own form. So those were the original Africans that came over. They were originally African. They stopped over there and they created their own distinct English out of being forced to speak. So I can see what the brother was talking about when he said that that's a binding factor. And when I hear my colleague talk when he's amongst his people, there is a connection that you don't have it. You don't have it's not your connection. It's not yours.
ironically, once we're out of our natural element, we have that connection. You could put a person from California, a black man from California, a black man from Denver, a black man from Philadelphia, a black man from North Carolina, and say, I'm just going to use this, it's probably a horrible example, the penal system. And that, everybody communicates, everybody cooperates, everybody works together. So we have it innately in us. Once we get on this side of it, then it just becomes, I gotta take what you have. I gotta keep you from getting more than I have, instead of you and I working together to get all of it. You understand? And I don't know.
It's almost like you're saying we suffer from rugged individualism, where we're
I understand the term.
We're not gonna collectively bond because I'm worried about my cabbage over here. You know
exactly.
what I mean?
You can't have any. You can't have any.
I'm worried about my cabbage over here. You can't have my cabbage.
Hell no. Hell no. Unless we're put into a position of almost complete depletion, then we have to work together.
And we used to have that. We used to have the rent parties. Yeah, we used to have.
Man, we grew up on that, brother.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. We used to have that cohesiveness.
Friday evening fish fries.
Yeah, we used to have all of that.
Rent. Hell yeah. Car parties.
So yeah, I'm gonna take it full circle again, and the good brother was right. Crack. I touched upon that earlier.
I think assimilation was more harmful than crack to us, man.
Well, put crack on top of that.
That's the icing.
You know what I mean? Put crack on top of that, man.
Yeah, I think when we lost when we lost the desire to want to be black. You know, man, we grew up in that era, man. We grew up in the black and proud era. You know what I'm saying? It's not. Where is it? What happened to it?
Man, I remember, man. I remember like when we was in the neighborhood, man.
You didn't have to leave the neighborhood.
We didn't have to leave the neighborhood, man. And listen, I tell people all the time, I didn't deal with white folks until I got in the military or I started working. I started work. I ain't know nothing about these folks. You know what I mean? I ain't know.
I had a little earlier introduction. I had a slightly earlier introduction.
So I mean, yeah, you did because you went to school with them in that parochial system and whatnot. So yeah, but yeah, I didn't deal with them outside of like authority figures, cops, and all that stuff. Like outside of that, man, I didn't have an introduction into the way you got to communicate, the way you have to be, and all that stuff until I started working downtown.
Right.
I started dealing with different people, but yeah, it's a shock to the system, and some people get, since we're talking about it, some people get lost in that, man. They don't want to come back.
They're pretty good over there, though, man.
They don't want to come back, man. I'm joking, like, man, I ain't even black. Ain't that what Ben Carson said? I ain't even black no more, man. What was that, OJ?
Listen.
I ain't black. I'm OJ.
Listen. Being a pet ain't a bad gig for some people, man.
Oh, man.
Integrity. You know
OJ said, I ain't never coming. What was that? What was it? I ain't never coming back. Call your mom. I ain't coming back home.
Yeah. There was the Harlem
coming
Nights.
to America. Oh, no.
Harlem Nights.
Harlem Nights, man. He ain't coming back, man.
Yeah.
So if you get, so if we laughing about it, but if we take that and multiply that by the mentality of that, then yeah, it makes sense now. I think we kind of answered our own question.
Well, that was the point.
Fighting yourself, So yeah, so it makes it hard to bond like this instead of being the five fingers and bond like that. If you over there where you seem to be real happy, I guess.